Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, this podcast is for you. Recruiting is a battlefield where the rules keep changing and the chaos never stops. As the world shifted to remote work, real connection and unfiltered learning have never been more urgent. This isn't just a podcast, it's your survival guide. Welcome to the revolution, your digital bullpen.
Mary Landrum here with us today, but before we kind of get into Mary's exciting story into recruitment, don't forget, we want you to follow us, like us, share us, comment. I want to give a quick shout out to Katie Hughes. I used to work with her. She sent us a wonderful message. And she was really impressed with our last guest, Nick Andrews. Shared it with all of our new hires. Just
That's
to kind
amazing.
share some like tips and tricks. So thank you, Nick, again for doing this, and thank you, Katie, for sharing our stuff.
You guys didn't watch it. There's some good new hire stuff in there. So
very good.
Yeah.
And now we have Mary Landrum. I'm so excited to have her
Mary.
on here today. She has a different perspective of recruitment, and we'll definitely have her share a ton, but she's head of talent acquisition in the US for Roc Search. She leads internal recruiting efforts across Austin, New York, and San Diego. She focuses on building high-performing teams, and she's developing effective recruiting strategies to support their growing business. She's super passionate about connecting with top talent to help them find their ideal roles, and even committed to offering candidates valuable insights and advice in the industry. So thank you, Mary, so much.
Recruiters.
Yes,
that's awesome.
And a fun fact about Mary that we got to learn about is she loves podcasts. So we are even super excited. She's thinking about maybe possibly doing that one day, but we'll see how she likes ours. And I mean, we'll definitely dive into more of her experience.
Yeah.
But Mary, I know that there's a couple things we wanted to kind of highlight you outside of like a recruiter. What are some fun facts that we should just like highlight about you?
Oh my gosh. That I love it outside of recruitment. I love true crime. I love reality TV. I was competitive cheerleader growing up. Big Justin Bieber fan. I mean,
Belieber fan, right?
Yes, I'm a
okay. Yeah, I just heard it's a believer. Like,
I love it. Big believer over here. Everybody knows it. I am obsessed with him. But yeah, I would say those are some fun facts about me.
I love it.
Honestly, people are like, "What are your hobbies and interests?" I'm like, just reality TV.
That's fair. That's a good one. That's a winner.
That.
It's fine. It's fine. Reality TV is great. Wait, so competitive cheerleader, were you the one that was thrown in the air, or like, were you like, cause that freaks,
yes.
Oh my God. Like you were a flyer. That's what they call it, right?
I was a flyer. Yes, I was a flyer. I was also a base at some points, but pretty much a flyer predominantly.
Oh my God. Did you ever break anything?
No, I actually didn't, which is pretty shocking. I mean, I was dropped pretty like a lot, but no broken bones or anything.
That's amazing.
Oh. Good.
Well, I'm glad. Again, it's just I see that and I'm like, they're gonna break something. So,
absolutely.
It's impressive what you guys can do.
It is. It's very impressive. Well, I tell you what, competitive folks, anybody in a competitive sport typically does really well in our industry, right? So, and it's something we always look for when we were hiring recruiters, right? But going into that, like, let's get to know who the heck is Mary Landrum. So, your origin story, like, how the hell did you get into staffing? Like, because it is, tell us about how you got here.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it. I don't think anybody like grows up saying that they want to be a recruiter when they grow up. They just kind of fall into it. And that was definitely what happened to me. I mean, I went to school wanting to go into visual merchandising. Like was my end all be all. That's what I wanted to do. While I was in, I guess, like my senior year, I took a class where it was really revolved around like resumes, building your LinkedIn, going to career fairs, interviews. And I don't know if everybody had to take that class, but I felt it was so important. It taught me a lot. And while I went to those career fairs, I was meeting these internal recruiters. I didn't know what they were at the time, but that's who I met. And I took a mental note at the time thinking like, wow, these people are really cool. They're almost like the face of this brand in a way.
Yeah.
But still, I was like, I'm still going to do visual merchandising. Working in retail, I just ended up being like, I do not want this life for the rest of my life. Like, I'm not working in retail, but I love the sales aspect of it. So I finally was like, I'm just going to make a transition. So towards the end of my senior year, I was in like an internship class, and I actually got an offer to work in tech sales. It's not on my LinkedIn or anything, but I was working at VMware while I was still in college. Yeah. So I was working there for a little bit, which I loved. Like, I loved the sales aspect of it. It definitely solidified that like that's something that I wanted to do. But I think that I learned that I wanted something maybe a little bit less transactional in a way, something more people facing. And so that's whenever I thought about recruitment. So my friends were in recruitment. And I actually had a recruiter reach out to me asking if I wanted another tech sales job. And I was like, I'm actually looking to get into recruitment, but if I know anybody, like, I'll let you know. And they go, well, we're actually hiring. So I was like, oh, okay. So
good recruiter.
Exactly.
Yes.
Ended up interviewing with them, a couple other companies, but ultimately took the offer from them, agency recruitment, and was going through there. I ramped up very slowly, I will say, but towards then started doing really good. And that's whenever I thought back to the career fair. Essentially all the internal recruiters that I met realized I was not in internal recruitment, I was in agency recruitment. Essentially there was no path to go down internal recruitment at that company. That's whenever I was in talks with Roc Search, was there for like 3 hours at one of the interviews, and I was like, I'm sold. And that's how I ended up here.
we get you, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, we're super happy that you joined the industry because it is a special one.
Oh, 100%.
And we're not biased at all.
Not at all.
Absolutely.
We've only devoted our whole lives to this industry. We're not biased at all.
It's okay. I feel like recruiters tend to do that. They become very passionate about it, which so am I. So
yeah.
It's a way of life. I mean, I think, on that note, it's one of those things that like, some jobs, like, if you're an accountant or something, it's not your way of life. It's your job, right? But as a recruiter, it's that social aspect. Like, I mean, when I was out and about, like, I literally would be out at a bar when I was younger drinking and be like, so what do you do? Who do you work for? Blah, blah, blah. You're right. I'm like, look, you always be recruiting, right?
Yeah, no, I feel like it's like an everyday thing. And it's like, you become so, it's normalized to you to like ask those type of questions. And for other people,
how much
they're
do you
like,
make?
I'm like,
are you happy with how
let's
much you
talk
make?
about it. And they're like, oh, I don't know if that's like, you should be asking that stuff. And I'm like, sorry, it's just like so normal to me. I just hear all this information all the time.
Totally okay.
So, I mean, you obviously kind of sought out to be in recruitment. So this might be a little different of a question, but if you weren't in recruitment, what would you be doing, Mary?
I mean, maybe I would have stuck with visual merchandising. Maybe I would have tried to see it out, but I like knowing what I know now, I just think that that's not the environment for me. I think I would be in some form of sales or in some sort of like consulting role, maybe like helping people in terms of like their career, their professional development, advice, all that stuff. But I'm happy that I am where I am now, essentially.
Well, that's what we do. All of those things are what we do every day. So it's it's a rewarding job if you do it right, if you approach it in that right way. So I love it. So let's talk about recruiting then, because a lot of people, don't know what you just mentioned. You didn't know what recruiting was when you got into it, and you kind of fell into getting to know these people. So what would you say is the biggest lie about recruiting that you think people outside of our industry you wish they'd stop believing?
That it's HR. I think that they're specifically agency recruitment, that they think it's HR. Because I'll be talking to anybody, if I say I'm a recruiter, they're like, oh, you're in HR, and I'm like, no, they don't want me to be in HR. I know nothing about that. And I think that is where you have to teach people in terms of like whenever they're getting into recruitment, the different forms, because if they want HR, that's a very different type of recruitment versus if they're saying, they're money motivated, they want a performance-based environment, they love sales. Okay, that's agency recruitment. There's different types of agency recruitment. So I would say the biggest like misconception is that everybody who's a recruiter is in HR.
Totally.
And I think too, the reason being of that is because normally in most corporate organizations, you have talent acquisition or recruitment right under HR.
Yes.
And
Yep.
sometimes they have somebody overseeing both. And so there is sometimes that blend, but even in corporate recruiting, it's not one and the same. So it is kind of interesting that you kind of highlighted it, because I believe that too.
Yeah.
I remember.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Go for it.
Well, I was saying my best friend is a corporate recruiter for a pretty big company, and she is HR essentially. And so whenever we talk about our jobs, I'm like, our jobs are so different. Like so different.
I forget what it was. I was younger and I remember we had HR. HR doesn't usually sit in recruiting bullpens for a reason. And I think I remember that it was HR was visiting us when I was with Agilon and accounting principals, and they were from Jacksonville. I was like, why don't you guys sit in our office? She's like, Paul, we need plausible deniability. Just like, I mean, it is. It's the true. Recruiting. It's like, it is the bullpen. It is, we are human resources' worst nightmare at some point. Not that we're proud, but we're real people. Like, you get to be real every day. Like, you get, the F-bomb gets dropped, and like, it is, when I interviewed people for recruiting, I remember when we had, the Michael Wilsons and all these wonderful people, you'll have them. But I was like, listen, if you're easily offended, you're going to be easily offended here. Like, and that is, so you can't work here if you're easily offended, because you just got to let it roll. And nobody outwardly is trying to ever offend you, but you just got to have that fun, thick skin, right?
Yes, that's actually
if not,
whenever
you cry.
One of the things that whenever I was interviewing for Roc Search that they loved is they asked me about that. And I was like, honestly, I don't get offended easily at all. Like, I'm the youngest of 4. And they were like, oh, really? Like, they loved that. And now looking back, I'm like, it's because of like how raw this, industry can be. And it's because you're working with people at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have to kind of cut through all of that fluff sometimes to just like get to the point. And that's the nice thing about being in this level of recruiting is you do get to talk to people, whether the client side, the candidate side, but you just kind of get to the point. And I think most people kind of like that too.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
100%.
So Mary, what do you think people in recruitment, why do you think, I guess, people go into recruitment, and what would you say is really kind of that secret sauce or the intangibles that somebody has to have to like really thrive in this industry?
I feel like people get into recruitment because, specifically like agency recruitment, probably because they want a different form of sales, essentially. Maybe they've tried sales before, or this is their first sales job and they just don't want to sell a product or a software. And this is the only form of sales where you're selling people something that is living, breathing feelings, emotions. I've said this a couple of times, but it's just an entirely different type of sales. I mean, so I think that people go out of their way to choose this form because it is just a ton of human interaction, but it can also bring a different level of challenges with this role, because once again, you're handling people at the end of the day. So people who thrive in this role, I think, are just people who are just so incredibly resilient, probably have faced challenges in their lives, like understand the value of a dollar, and understand that hard work is what gets you there, consistency. Like people who probably bill so much right away in their first couple months at an entry-level job. Like, I honestly would rather have people not bill right away and then fight through all that resilience and see the outcome later versus people who bill right away.
It's the worst. You're like, oh no, it's not that easy.
And like, no. It's easy.
And they're like, well, you told me this was like the hardest job ever, and I'm billing right away. I'm like, oh, this is where your resilience is going to be tested. So I would just say like just an insane amount of resilience, because you're facing incredibly difficult challenges quite often. So
and the challenges are within like, the human element. Your client's a human, you're a human, the person that, your candidate's a human. And so there's just way more involved than just, like you said, a product that you can just ship, it arrives, you set it up, it works.
It doesn't say no.
Work, you can see, exactly. You can just send another one or whatever these people do, right?
You got to make sure they're getting up, going to their interview, it's like babysitting in a way. So it's very,
it can be. It
comes with a lot of challenges, but it can also be very rewarding. So
Yes.
And it's very much
Yeah.
like, I think it's project management too. Like a lot of
Yeah.
what we do is like project management mindset. I mean, because we're literally taking on a hiring project, right? And we have to take it from cradle to grave. And I think the best ones really handle it with those kid gloves. Is that what it is? Or kitten gloves? I always say kitten
Kitten
gloves.
gloves.
I don't know. I like kitten gloves better. But
I think it's kitten gloves. Oh, I'm the worst at that stuff, so don't
yeah,
ask me.
I mess up things all the time. Well, I freaking love it. And that is probably why you're fantastic, because I think you really identified what makes people thrive. So let's talk about that, because you gave us a little bit of insight, but you recruit recruiters and salespeople to join our industry. So there's a number of people that are internal acquisitions for recruiting companies. So this is a very common role within recruiting companies. It's not just sales, and everybody's a salesperson, right? In recruiting, no matter what. So if you don't like sales, don't come, right? Don't come hang out. But so what would you say, like, what advice do you have for folks who are going to interview for a role in recruiting, right? So, they decided they want to be a recruiter. They heard your inspiring speech just today, and they're like, I'm going to freaking go for it, right? So what advice do you have?
There's a ton. I would first say like understanding the different forms of recruitment. And I could definitely break that down. But even if we're just talking about agency, figuring out if you're wanting to be on a 360 desk or a 180 desk, and just understanding the different forms so you can just be educated whenever you're actually talking to these recruiters, because that's where the motivations come in. Their motivations for getting into agency recruitment are entirely different from getting into like an internal role. So having your motivations very much nailed down. And if you're motivated by money, or if you're motivated by something else, if you have a hard work ethic or you're resilient, my biggest piece of advice is really just having evidence. Because you can literally say, you can describe yourself as absolutely anything. It's the evidence that actually backs it up. So I would say providing actual evidence whenever you're in the interview. If you're wanting to actually get interviews, I know it's really hard to get interviews nowadays. It's just going out of your way to actually build your network on your LinkedIn profile and really standing out in a different way. I mean, I've had somebody literally cold call me to get an interview saying that they've applied to the job, and I loved it. And I actually saw that their resume, because there are so many different resumes, there's different people that I'm messaging. So I think just standing out in that way of just either maybe giving them a call. I know some recruiters don't like that. Sending them a voice note on LinkedIn. But overall, whenever you're actually interviewing, it's just actually know the role, do your research, understand the different forms of recruitment, provide evidence along the way of the things that you're describing yourself as. And I mean, I could keep going on and on.
No, I love it. And walk in, show up to the office, like walk in. Like, I mean, I think it's so many people are scared to do that, but I'm like, I mean, that's what we want. We want people that are not scared to walk in the front door and knock, right? And so what do you think if somebody says, well, I just really like helping people?
So that is, I feel like, a controversial thing to say.
It is.
But
we're raw here. We're real.
Like, I feel like it's dependent on who you're talking to, because whenever I got into agency recruitment, I said that, like, I want to help people. Very quickly, I learned that, yes, you are helping people, but you're also helping people for not in a selfish way, but you're gaining money from this. You're also hitting targets to get a promotion, to get maybe a higher salary or a higher title. So yes, at the end of the day, you are helping people, but it can still be a little bit transactional in a way. So you can't just be motivated by helping people. You have to also be motivated by something else. I think if you're saying helping people is something that I want to do, I would also be prying of like, okay, what else motivates you? Because if helping people is your number one priority and your number one motivator, you may want to rethink this a little bit, just because it could be a challenge, I would say.
I think it's because too, on that note, because people you can't place everybody, right? Now we can help everybody we meet, meaning we can give them advice. We can help them with their job search. We can help them with resume advice, right? So we do help everyone, but we can't put everybody in front of a job, because some people are just not placeable all the time, right? And it's unfortunate with our clients, right? And so I think it's like, if you can't help all of them, and so it's that mental state of just understanding, who can I put this person in front of my client? No, okay, then I need to actually help them and wish them the best, right?
Yeah, and I think that kind of adds on to it of like, if they're saying that they want to help people and then they can't help everybody, it could almost take an emotional toll on them like, is this maybe is this meant for me? So I think that if that's their number one priority, then I would just be thinking a lot of like, okay, well, what would the emotional toll be? What it would be your resilience then in terms when the challenges happen. But
I love it.
I've gotten that a lot for sure.
Yeah, and you hit on something that I just want to highlight because there are so many people out there
Hmm.
looking for work. And you said something that I don't think a lot of people really understand because we're in LinkedIn all day long.
Hmm.
We live and breathe in there and we're constantly sourcing. So when somebody reaches out to you personally because they applied to a job, I don't know what recruiters would be upset about that if they are
No.
questionable, but
Yes.
I love that because they're taking that initiative where there's so many people just applying. I just had a conversation with a friend who's struggling to look for work, and I'm like, you've got to follow up. Like,
Mhm.
luckily, you have a friend that's a recruiter. I have access to Zoom info. I will give you all of the data information that you need. But like you've got to be very aggressive because you're talking about applying to jobs where I'm sure they're getting hundreds of applications constantly. And
Yeah.
you do have to kind of make yourself stand out. So that is just good advice just in general if you're a job seeker today. So I highly recommend you take that
I
piece of
love it.
advice if you're out there searching today.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And we're kind of moving into the next question, Mary, but we've talked about this really. I mean, tell us about that, your recruiting approach. You talked a lot about being consultative versus like transactional. What does that really mean to you?
I think being consultative is more so because whenever I joined the industry, I genuinely had no idea what recruitment was as much as I thought that I knew. And I was like, oh, you're just placing people into jobs at the end of the day. Like I didn't understand the actual process. I honestly
Correct.
didn't even know what side of the process I was on. I eventually learned I was on the delivery side of it. I wasn't actually doing anything in terms of the client side. And then whenever I got to Roc Search, at first we were on a 360 desk and I was like, what does that mean? And they had to explain everything to me. And I was like, wow, this could have been very useful to know whenever I was starting off my search of these are the different types of recruitment. This is what internal is. This is what external agency is. These are the different avenues you can take with an agency. Do you want to be on that side? Do you want to this side? Do you want to do both of them? So I think primarily whenever it comes to like even entry level is they just don't know this stuff. So whenever I'm talking to them on especially that first call is I'm just giving them a ton of information. And especially if they're not interviewing other places, I'm almost giving them our competitors' names, telling them this person's hiring, this person's hiring, go interview for them. I don't know if people do that necessarily in agency recruitment, but for me, it's like, I don't want to risk that we were their only option and this is their first place that they're just going to try out. I want them to have so many options. I want them to look into different companies, know everything about recruitment. And that even brings me to like our previous question. If somebody's coming to me and saying like, hey, the reason I want to get into recruitment is because I want to help people or, for this or for that reason, it's nothing that really, rings in my ear of like sales. They're not saying anything about money motivation or competitiveness. I don't stop them by any means, but I just like to educate them of like, okay, listen, maybe you would be more interested in this side, like just giving them all the information just because I was very lost at that point. And for me, it's like, I'm not just placing these people at a different company, at a client, and I'll never see them again, never talk to them. I'm with them on a daily basis. I want them to be educated. I want them to choose us, not just because we were their only option, but because they loved us at the end of the day. So it's just not transactional to me because yes, I care about the money, but I also care more about like the long-term vision of like where they're going to go in their career. So
and two, the difference too of what you shared is that there's a difference between being specialized in the staffing world versus generalized. And I think that's something people don't necessarily understand going into the agency world as well. Like you can actually be very super specialized in the recruitment stuff that, recruitment roles that you want to get into or the types of clients you want to be like selling to.
absolutely.
Well, I tell you what, there's a reason why you're probably really good and Roc Search is lucky to have you because that is a fantastic approach. Like I think you are consultative. You're in it for them. You're in it for the person and the person interviewing as well, which, it's interesting because AI is something that is, I mean, there's so many products being like, oh, we can replace your recruiting team and, all these things. But I mean, what do you think is the one thing that AI is not going to be able to replace for a while?
What you just said, like the human interaction, like
I led the witness. I'm sorry.
Well, that's what I get asked this honestly a lot on interviews is that exact question. And the thing that I always say is just like that human interaction. Like half the people who take the job, you know, at Roc Search, it's probably a huge part of it is like the people that they talk to throughout the process and the trust that we've built throughout everything. And that goes back to the approach that I take of like not making them feel like, you know, you're just another number, you're just another ant in the pile. It's like, no, but you actually are a person like this next to your relationships or where you're going to live. Your career is one of the most, you know, important decisions you can make in your life. And we're a part of that. So whenever it goes to AI, it's like, well, how are they going to, you can't have that personal trust and human interaction. So I just don't think that can ever be replaced at the end of the day. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. And I think sorry, go for it.
No, go for it. Yeah.
I was just going to say that AI comes in like any new thing that ever came into recruiting. Career Builder. I know Paul and I were already in recruiting when like Career Builder, the monsters of the world, and then LinkedIn came and it was like, oh my God, you know, and actually I love that LinkedIn came out because it made it super competitive. Like there's a database out there and whoever is going to win that client is going to win that client, and whoever's going to win that candidate is going to win the candidate. We really change the mentality around databases, at least from my perspective, when it came to LinkedIn coming out, right? And it was the same thought, like, oh my God, LinkedIn's going to take over and we're going to have to find other jobs, but there's still that human element of matching people to the roles, getting them excited, and showing them a different perspective of what their career could look like.
Yeah, it's true. And I think that, you know, I tell a story. There was a guy that I reached out to a while back. We needed a developer person. And when I reached out to him, he actually called me back and said, and he was like, Paul, I had given up on recruiters because everyone was transactional. But the way you approached me, I've reignited my love. And I'm this, you know, and we ended up hiring, but it's just because I was personable, right? That human touch. And it's just being able to like individualize how you reach out. So I love that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I love whenever people say that to me too, or even just whenever you respond to somebody on LinkedIn that's messaging you. Like you said, some people get annoyed by that. And like lately, whenever I've been responding to people, they're just like, thank you so much for actually responding. And I'm like, what? We're in the business of people, like definitely being able to help them out. Yeah.
Well, let's see. What about, I know we kind of talked about this before the call, but any like outrageous networking events, like being someone that is constantly kind of on the lookout for new talent, up and coming talent, or, you know, somebody wanting to find just a new company for whatever reason, networking, how does that play a part in your recruiting?
So in terms of like an event that I've gone to, we went to the Austin Women's Magazine gala. That was so much fun. I'd never gone to a gala before. Got to dress up, wine and dine. So much fun. And yeah, we just got to hear like the most incredible stories from all these different types of women who have gone through so many different types of challenges and have built up something so incredible to like their personal empire. And we just got to listen to all these stories. And I mean, I think it was just really inspiring because something that is super important to me is just like having more diversity in general, and also just like women in leadership and being able to like hear their stories, because I think that it's just so easy to relate to these girls. And so that was something that I really enjoyed going to. I don't know if it was like outrageous, but it was just a lot of fun. We had so much fun.
It was Girls Gone Wild. Like, it was just,
yeah, it was great. It was great. As far as like networking and the importance of it, I think that's what you were asking, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So I mean, I think it's just like the face-to-face time, like, especially if you're on like the business development side, like you really want to have that face-to-face time with these clients, or just like at these networking events, and just in general, like if you're a job seeker looking for a job, like going to these events is massive, because that's how you actually build the rapport and build those relationships, is having that face-to-face time. And it's just a great opportunity to just meet really awesome people. Like we're living in the day and age where like virtual meetings and things like this are, you know, very important. But I think people almost hold it to like a really high standard, where they're not looking at the fact of like the face-to-face time is what actually brings the wins and, you know, get to know somebody. So I think networking is huge, but I also just think it's really fun. Like you get to meet some really incredible people.
Totally. Well, I
Yes,
love it.
yes.
Mary, I tell you what, you are, I mean, I stalked you, by the way, on LinkedIn, if anybody knows. Like, I literally I saw some of your posts on LinkedIn, and you're thoughtful and your emotions in there. And so I totally stalked you, and that's how I got you on our podcast. So I appreciate you trusting us, because you're amazing. And I wanted to share your story with everybody out there because I
Yeah.
think it is inspiring and impactful. So thank you. Now let's get to know a little bit about the Mary that's not recruiting, right? So, what is a guilty pleasure that we'll call our fast forward today? What's your guilty pleasure to decompress after a day in the world of staffing?
Like honestly, just reality TV. Like I don't know if you guys have seen like the TikTok videos where it's like the captions like, "Oh, after a long stressful day, like time to relax," and like the sound is just like the women of like Real Housewives just like screaming at each other. Like that's my life.
Yes.
Is just sitting down and just watching the drama unfold, and I'm just
Yes.
like, yeah, I'm just like
Someone
so
else's
intrigued
drama.
with it.
Yeah, and appreciate it's not yours.
Exactly.
Exactly.
That's absolutely how I decompress. Is just like turn on Real Housewives or something.
Yes, yes. Now, I mean, you might be able to tell us which one. What's the show that you binge watched and couldn't get enough of, in terms of shows you like?
Like overall, I don't like. I would say Vanderpump Rules is like my favorite. Like I just keep turning that on and on. Most recently, what I've been watching, it's actually not reality TV. I just turned on, I think it's called Little Fires Everywhere or something like that.
Okay.
I've never heard about it.
I hadn't either. My friends have been raving about it. I also just watched Tell Me Lies, but I'm really into Little Fires Everywhere. Love that. Also, Love is
Okay.
Blind. I just keep watching more and more, honestly.
I love it. She's just decompressing, watching the people that date. I love it.
Exactly.
Okay, so you like podcasts as well. Is there a favorite podcast, obviously, besides the Recruitment Revolution, your Digital Bullpen? What's your favorite podcast?
I don't know the name of her specific one, but I love Kendall Ray at True Crime. I'm also big on true crime.
Yes.
Listen to her all the time. She also has another one called, believe it's called Mile Higher. That's more just like different conspiracy theories and things like that, different kind of breaking down documentaries in more of just like a podcast way. Another one would be like Two Hot Takes. Love that one. It's just like Reddit things, but primarily just like true crime podcasts.
I love
Love.
it.
Love. What's one thing that's filling your heart with gratitude these days, Mary?
Oh my gosh. My dog overall. I got a puppy this year. Love her.
What kind of puppy?
Well, we actually just got her DNA test back. She looks nothing like this. Well, she does. She looks predominantly like a German Shepherd. Yeah, she has German Shepherd in her, but the other is like Great Pyrenees. But she's literally so tiny, and she's not going to grow like at all. And so we're really confused, but yeah, she's like my pride and joy. So I would say like overall, but as of right now, like doing this podcast is definitely filling me with gratitude. Like I think we talked about it in like our first call that like we can't talk to like family or friends who aren't in this industry about the things that we go through because they literally just don't get it. And so whenever we first talked and we were all like, bouncing ideas and everything off each other, I was like, wow, this is really nice. So being here right now, just being able to actually talk about it with people who understand it.
Right.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for it.
Well, I am so grateful that you're part of our recruitment community now and you're in it. Like I can't wait till I get down and get to meet you in person and have a drink because we will for sure. I know you're in Austin, right?
Yeah. So not right now. I'm in San Antonio because my husband's in grad school over here, but I will be moving back in the next year. So I'm really excited about that.
Well, when you get back there, because I'm not in San Antonio, we'll go to Austin. So, I thank you so much for being on our podcast today.
Yes, thank you, Mary.
I know everybody out there is going to love it and can't wait to talk to you again.
I know. Thank you guys for having me.
You're speaking to our people. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Have a great Wednesday.